Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Managing Editor, Associated Press, Michael Oreskes.
Thank you very much. Who says that APEC doesn't rock, right? In the annals of Asian success stories, there is a special place for Indonesia, the archipelago nation with the largest Muslim population on earth. From the ashes of the Asian financial crisis, Indonesia rose vibrant and growing and democratic as well. The leader at the center of all of that is known far and wide across his country simply as SBY. He was a general, a political leader. As you just heard, he's an accomplished singer and songwriter who's just released his 4th album, which just had its international preview right here in this hall. Please welcome the President of Indonesia, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be here at the APEC CEO Summit this morning to address the leading business leaders in the Asia-Pacific region. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation was launched more than 2 decades ago, and the Bogor goals were outlined in 1994 to realize a vision of free and open trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific no later than 2020. We achieved much in the last 2 decades. There has been peace, stability, prosperity, and increased economic integration. Average tariffs on goods have fallen from 16.9% to 5.5%, and intra-APEC trade increased more than 5-fold from $1.7 trillion to close to $10 trillion. In the late 1990s, the economies in the APEC region have been affected by the East Asian crisis, and many came out stronger and with sound fundamentals. This enabled Indonesia and a number of other APEC economies to weather and rebound from the recent global crisis. Hundreds of millions have also been lifted out of poverty, and the size of the middle class is growing remarkably, changing the face of the region. There is good likelihood that the 21st century may well be the Asia-Pacific century. Today, Asia-Pacific region, which connects Asia and the Americas and covers both the Pacific and Indian Ocean, is fast emerging to be the strategic and economic pivot of the world. If we can identify the way forward, what we do to ensure peace and progress in the region will also redefine the future of the world. While things are looking up, we must keep in mind that the bright Asia-Pacific century is not preordained. We must earn it every step of the way. We must build it brick by brick. Let me suggest some thoughts and ideas on how to realize the Asia-Pacific century. First, the Asia-Pacific century must be central to efforts to achieve a strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth for the world economy. Here, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. We have had a framework and actions plan under the G20 to achieve this. 9 out of the 21 APEC members are G20 members, and the world's largest economies, the United States, Japan, and China. The Asia-Pacific region also includes emerging economies, such as South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, Vietnam, and others. In the next few decades, most, if not all, of Asia-Pacific economies will join the ranks of middle-income countries. And by 2050, the Asian Development Bank predicts there will be no poor country in Asia. In the recent G20 summit in Cannes, leaders have come up with a concrete action plan on how to rebalance the world economy toward a more sustainable growth between surplus and deficit countries. Asia-Pacific will be central to this global rebalancing. Each of us will need to do our part and show political will to pursue needed fiscal consolidation, structural reforms and restructuring, and for some, painful adjustments. This is what Indonesia did several years ago when we took the hard decision to reduce oil subsidies. The result has been worth the effort. Because of such restructuring, our economy today has much better fundamentals and much more resilient in withstanding the impacts of the global financial crisis. Second, to anticipate the Asia-Pacific century, we need to redefine the regional architecture into an open, effective, inclusive, and transparent one. This is particularly important for all of us to keep up with the diplomatic, political, economic, and social changes that will move with great speed. We have been fortunate to see the very positive growth of regional and sub-regional organizations in the region: ASEAN, ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Plus 3, APEC, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, East Asia Summit, and others. They have created a totally new diplomatic and economic environment for the region. Perhaps there will come a time, someday, when we will need to make some adjustment for a more coherent and streamlined architecture. For the time being, however, we need to ensure that they all blossom as pillars of regional order. We must now promote a regional architecture in which geoeconomics of cooperation is prevalent, in contrast with the geopolitics of division of the past. This geoeconomics should drive nations to work together as mutual stakeholders on the basis of common interests driven by new opportunities. We have had plenty of examples of the transformational power of economic cooperation, bilaterally, sub-regionally, and regionally. This new geoeconomic must also include the ability to turn potential conflict into potential cooperation. It must also once again include public-private partnerships for win-win cooperation, turning challenges to opportunities. The success of the Great Mekong sub-regional cooperation involving 6 countries is one inspiring example of how nations creatively work together to manage much-needed resources. Third, the Asia-Pacific century will also need to evolve a dynamic equilibrium. We are fortunate that for the first time in a long time, nations among the major powers are marked by peace, stability, and cooperation. But new power centers are growing rapidly, and power relationships are changing and becoming much more fluid. It is pertinent that these evolving power relationships do not lead to new strategic tension, destabilizing rivalries, or worse, new conflicts. Instead, we must make sure that they lead to growing confidence, more cooperation, and even closer integration. One way to ensure such healthy dynamic equilibrium is to transform relationships into partnership. Indeed, I am heartened to see the remarkable proliferation of partnerships among nations in Asia-Pacific. Whatever they name it, strategic partnership, comprehensive partnership, economic partnership, 21st century partnership, it is healthy and positive and spreading. We in Indonesia have also done this. In recent years, we have developed new comprehensive and strategic partnership with about a dozen countries, some of which we had difficult relations with in the past. Evolving creative partnership is the more so important because in the coming decade, the scramble for resources will be certain to intensify. Energy demand in Asia-Pacific will rise by 30% by 2030. Food production should rise by 70% to meet global demand by 2050. Water will become more scarce. The quest by nations to find, secure, expand, and sustain their development resources will define the Asia-Pacific century. Fourth, the Asia-Pacific century must be built on the fast-changing social landscape that some say are even more powerful than the 20th century revolution. We are living in the age of connectivity, the age of information and openness. Traditional hierarchies are being matched by new networks of individuals and organizations in a borderless world. Every individual with the right digital tools can become his own voice in the marketplace of ideas. In Indonesia alone, our people have become the largest user of Facebook and Twitter in Asia. All this is fundamentally changing politics, market, and society. We are now living in a time when connections between individuals, peoples, and organizations are much more intense than the official connections between governments. We are yet to comprehend the long-term implication of this. But surely, the Asia-Pacific century will need to accommodate and embrace this revolutionary change in our social landscape. As this is a short, medium, and long-term trend, Asia-Pacific nations must factor it into our politics and economy. We must become more people-centered and recognize that greater and faster information flows will mean transparency is no longer a choice, but a must. In the final analysis, to progress together, we need to adopt a win-win mindset and oppose the zero-sum, win-lose approach that was predominant in the last century. In the 20th century, we witnessed proliferation of sovereignty throughout our region. In the 21st century, we will see proliferation of modernity across the Indian and Pacific Ocean. Thus, we are now at a point when Asia-Pacific nations have the great opportunity to achieve the rare condition of synergized progress, all moving toward together in synergy. It is also necessary for us to embrace a forward-looking mindset. For all the things that happened in the past, we must try to leave behind historical baggage and move on with new approach to new partnerships and architecture. In Indonesia, we have been in the business of change for some years now. And we know well that the business of change requires many things. It requires imagination, it requires a plan, it requires collaboration, it requires endurance, it requires political will, and it requires courage. With all the things that have changed, we have transformed our politics, becoming democratic, respectful of human rights, and with greater participation by the people. We have ensured that in our nation, democracy, Islam, and modernity go hand in hand. Our economy has been transformed with better macroeconomic performance, sustained high growth, and stronger fundamentals. And our international role has also grown with what we now call all-direction foreign policy. We have also learned that all stakeholders must be involved and take ownership of the process. Finally, if we all do that, I am confident that we will all see the dawn of the Asia-Pacific century and have the rare opportunity to actually live it. I thank you.
Mr. President, thank you. The President has agreed to sit and chat with us for a few minutes. As you all know already, we will take some questions, so find those lovely young people with the signs, numbers 1 through 5 over there. But I'll get us started. Also, the President will be answering, at least in some cases, in Indonesian, so get your headsets. I think everybody knows the numbers. Welcome, thank you very much. You're heading straight out from Hawaii back home to host the East Asia Summit. You won't get to enjoy as much of the nice weather here, but you have big work to do, I think, there. So tell us a little bit about how you move forward East Asia Summit, ASEAN, on the program you just outlined.
Ya, kita mengenal G20 yang mengelola perekonomian global. Kita memiliki regional organization, termasuk APEC dan East Asia Summit. Tentunya apa yang akan kami diskusikan di Bali dalam East Asian Summit mengalir dari apa yang kita bicarakan dalam forum G20 dan tentunya akan mewadahi isu-isu yang ada di Asia Timur, termasuk untuk pertama kali Rusia dan Amerika Serikat ikut di dalam East Asia Summit tersebut. Tentu kami akan membahas masalah-masalah ekonomi di kawasan agar kita bisa berkontribusi untuk stronger global economy dan juga more balanced global economy, termasuk connectivity yang harus kita bangun. Yang kedua tentunya kami akan bicara geopolitics di Asia Pasifik, kerjasama maritim, kerjasama antar negara agar apapun yang terjadi di Asia Pasifik kita bisa menemukan solusi damai sehingga mempertahankan kondisi Asia Pasifik yang stable, secure, peaceful, sehingga ekonomi bisa kita kembangkan. Dan yang ketiga tentunya kita membahas hal-hal lain seperti climate change, upaya menghadapi terorisme, kemudian disaster relief operation dan sebagainya. Jadi kita akan membahas semuanya itu dalam konteks East Asia Summit mendatang.
President Obama was on this stage just a few minutes ago, and he talked about his plans to go to the East Asia Summit, and he said specifically that he was going to be going there to ask, how can we, a great Pacific power, work with our partners? That was President Obama. What's your answer to him? What's your answer to the question of the proper role of the United States in Asia?
Saya kira sudah saatnya Amerika juga harus meningkatkan engagement, partnership, dan kerjasamanya dengan Asia, dengan Asia Timur, termasuk dengan ASEAN. Tentu saja dengan bergabungnya Amerika Serikat dan termasuk Rusia dalam East Asia Summit, harapan saya kepada Amerika Serikat untuk betul-betul meningkatkan kerjasama ekonominya. Kalau kerjasama ekonomi dengan Asia Timur tentunya bukan hanya dengan Jepang, dengan China, dengan India sebagai partner yang sudah terbangun, tapi juga dengan ASEAN. Ekonomi ASEAN is growing very well. Kami berharap kerjasama antara Amerika dengan ASEAN juga bisa ditingkatkan. Tentu saja Amerika juga ikut serta tentunya untuk membuat kawasan kami menghadapi non-traditional security threat seperti sekali lagi bencana alam, kemudian penyakit menular, lantas juga combating transnational crimes, terorisme dan sebagainya. Menurut saya Amerika memiliki kekuatan yang besar untuk bersama-sama bangsa Asia Timur membangun sebutlah abad Asia Pasifik yang tentu akan membawa manfaat bagi semua, termasuk bagi Amerika Serikat sendiri.
You once said that the United States should stop worrying about being a superpower. Can it be what it needs to be in Asia without worrying about being a superpower and balancing China?
Iya, sebenarnya saya kurang begitu percaya dengan bahwa dunia harus didominasi oleh one single superpower. Dunia terus berubah, ekonomi global sekarang dulu ada pilar Amerika, pilar Eropa, ternyata sekarang sudah changing, ada juga pilar Asia. Asia pun ada India, ada Jepang, ada Tiongkok, tapi juga ada ASEAN. Oleh karena itu menurut saya kalau kita sepakat membangun yang saya sebut dengan dynamic equilibrium di Asia Pasifik, di Asia Timur, maka keberadaan Amerika Serikat menurut saya bisa menjadi main player untuk memastikan kawasan ini tumbuh secara ekonomi, secara politik dan keamanan, dan juga menangani isu-isu global yang lain.
I'm going to have some other questions myself, but I want to come out here, right here for a question. Please let us know who you are.
Mr. President, thank you for your visionary remarks. I'm John Riyadi from Lippo Group, Indonesia. You mentioned in your speech that we are now living in an age of connectivity. How important is connectivity in Indonesia, and what is your vision for increasing connectivity in Indonesia? Thank you.
Konektivitas sangat penting bagi Indonesia dan juga bagi ASEAN. Kalau kita melihat geografi, geoekonomi di kawasan Asia Tenggara, termasuk Indonesia, maka ke depan bagi Indonesia akan meningkatkan connectivity. Bicara connectivity, bicara infrastructure building, bicara transportation, bicara ICT, bicara investment and trade, banyak sekali yang bisa kita tawarkan untuk kerjasama dengan negara-negara sahabat dengan membangun our domestic connectivity. Sementara itu ASEAN juga sangat penting. Ada Indonesia, ada Singapura, ada Malaysia, ada Brunei Darussalam, Filipina, Laos, Kamboja, Vietnam, Myanmar. Itu masih sangat terbuka untuk dibangun konektivitas di kawasan Asia Tenggara. Benar, dan kami akan menggunakan kemampuan yang ada di Indonesia, kemampuan yang ada di ASEAN, tapi we need partners. Kita memerlukan teman-teman dari luar negeri to join us in building our connectivity untuk apapun yang bisa dilakukan, karena opportunity terbuka sekali dan kami menyambut dengan baik. Mari kita bangun connectivity di Indonesia dan di Asia Tenggara, dan kalau itu tumbuh maka akan menjadi new economic pillars yang juga akan berkontribusi bagi keseluruhan global growth and global economic balance.
Let me ask you about another global issue, climate change. The International Energy Agency issued a report this week that said that within 5 years, if the world economy continues to produce the levels of carbon it's producing, that within 5 years, dramatic increases in temperature will be irreversible. And of course that would bring with it sea level rises, which would be of considerable impact to countries like Indonesia, island nations. You made a big commitment to climate change, to protecting the forests of Indonesia. How is that commitment going, and is it already too late?
Ya, sebenarnya climate change adalah persoalan global, persoalan dunia. Semua harus secara serius dan aktif untuk mengelolanya. Negara maju, negara berkembang, semua harus berbuat lebih banyak lagi. Untuk Indonesia sebetulnya bukan hanya komitmen, kami terus bekerja dan akan terus bekerja. Indonesia sebenarnya yang menonjol adalah pemeliharaan hutan kami. Kalau kami sampai 2020 bisa mengurangi emisi karbon yang berasal dari hutan, maka sebenarnya emisi karbon di Indonesia akan drop very significantly. Kami bekerja untuk itu secara domestik maupun kerjasama dengan negara-negara sahabat, misalkan REDD+, antara Indonesia dengan Norwegia dan Indonesia dengan negara-negara sahabat adalah contoh kolaborasi bilateral yang real, yang nyata untuk memelihara hutan kami, mencegah deforestasi, mencegah kebakaran hutan, menanam kembali atau reboisasi, dengan harapan dari pemeliharaan hutan kami akan contribute secara signifikan reducing global emission. Kami punya target 26% dari business as usual sebelum tahun 2020. Saya yakin bisa kita capai karena pemeliharaan hutan yang kami laksanakan sekarang ini sangat serius.
As certainly everyone in Indonesia knows, your term expires in 2014. Indonesia has term limits, but I want to ask you a follow-up related to climate change. I've heard it suggested that you might be interested after your term ends in taking a leadership role in the UN Climate Change Conference. Any thought of that?
Indonesia pernah menjadi tuan rumah pada tahun 2007 ketika menyelenggarakan UN Conference on Climate Change di Bali, dan kami menghasilkan Bali Roadmap. Alhamdulillah ditindaklanjuti di Copenhagen, di Cancun, di Durban, mudah-mudahan kita bisa bersepakat. Tetapi satu hal, saya melihat tren yang positif. 3-4 tahun yang lalu jarak itu begitu menganga. Perbedaan di antara banyak negara, emerging economies, developing countries, sekarang sudah mulai mendekat. Saya optimistik bahwa pada saatnya nanti kami akan bersepakat untuk membangun satu konsensus, menciptakan protokol baru mengganti Kyoto Protocol yang memang sudah lama ditunggu. Kuncinya adalah menurut saya semua harus willing to take and give. Semuanya harus do more in the years to come. Dan tanpa itu saya pikir tidak akan ada the effective global collaboration in combating climate change.
But no word yet about your plans after 2014? No word yet on what you might think of doing after you leave office in 2014.
Indonesia akan menjadi bagian, tentunya akan berkontribusi itu semua. Tetapi sekali lagi saya mengikuti tiap tahun tentang diskusi yang hangat berkaitan dengan climate change ini. Memang banyak players yang harus bersepakat untuk bagaimana menyukseskan ini. Indonesia more than willing untuk suatu saat kembali menjadi host, menjadi tuan rumah bersama-sama yang lain untuk betul-betul kita menghasilkan protokol yang kita harapkan.
Thank you. I think we have a question over here.
Mr. President, I'm Liu Dongguang from Taiwan. As you said, Indonesia faced a huge financial crisis during the Asian crisis in '98. Indonesia was very successful in overcoming its hurdles. Could you let us know what kind of hurdles you faced, how you faced them? And I remember reading about how gasoline was very cheap and then yet you had to raise it to market prices and cause a lot of hardship. Specifically because in Europe right now, we see that in Greece, the Prime Minister had to resign. Italy, Berlusconi also has resigned. What do you recommend that they do so that they can become better? Thank you.
Can you cannot, what's what the question actually?
I'm sorry?
The question is, what's the question?
I think the question is essentially, can you talk a little bit about what was behind the economic success of Indonesia? You've had significant growth rates, and maybe you can add a little bit about what you're going to do to maintain the growth rates of Indonesia.
Terima kasih, thank you. Kami pernah mengalami krisis yang luar biasa. 1998, ekonomi kami kolaps. Kami belajar mengapa ekonomi kolaps. Pertama, fundamentals yang tidak bagus. Yang kedua, tidak ada sinergi antara the government dan business sectors. Kemudian policy errors. Kemudian juga kerjasama yang tidak bagus dengan IMF waktu itu. Oleh karena itu setelah itu kami melaksanakan reformasi di segala bidang. 3 tahun yang lalu ketika kami menghadapi reformasi, kesalahan yang Indonesia lakukan pada tahun 1998 tidak kami ulangi. Kami lebih bersatu antara the government and the private sectors. Kemudian kami tentu karena melaksanakan reformasi, fundamental kami lebih kuat. Dan dengan demikian meskipun ada impact terhadap perekonomian kami, tapi kami bisa mengurangi dampak dari krisis itu. tentang menjaga growth, pertumbuhan kami tahun ini sekitar 6,5%, tahun depan harapan kami menuju ke 7%. Kami akan lakukan investasi besar-besaran, kami mengundang semuanya to invest in Indonesia. Kami juga akan menjaga kemampuan ekspor kami. Di samping domestic trade akan kami tingkatkan, konsumsi dalam negeri juga akan menjadi penting dan government spending akan kami kontribusikan untuk pertumbuhan. Tetapi belajar dari pengalaman di Eropa dan di negara-negara lain, kami menjaga disiplin fiskal yang kuat, mengurangi defisit. Defisit kami sekarang 2,1%, tahun depan kami berharap menjadi 1,5% dan seterusnya, makin hilang menuju ke balance budget. Debt to GDP ratio kami dari 56% beberapa saat yang lalu menjadi 25% saja dan ini akan kami jaga. Dengan demikian makroekonomi terjaga sambil meningkatkan investasi dan penguatan ekonomi domestik. Itulah kira-kira yang akan kami lakukan ke depan. Meskipun dunia sering tidak bersahabat, krisis bisa saja datang setiap saat, tapi kami akan berusaha sekuat tenaga untuk mengurangi dampak dan menjaga ekonomi kami makin resilient.
Let me ask one follow-up question about growth. You hear from business leaders all over Asia their concerns about corruption. And you hear that, of course, about fears of investing in Indonesia because of corruption. What answer do you have to business leaders on that issue?
Saya kira korupsi itu dihadapi oleh banyak negara, bukan hanya Indonesia. Korupsi yang melibatkan antara politik dengan bisnis, baik domestic business maupun yang dilaksanakan foreign business juga terjadi. Kami menyadari korupsi adalah merupakan tantangan dan persoalan yang besar yang dihadapi bangsa Indonesia. Oleh karena itu 7 tahun terakhir ini kami melaksanakan kampanye anti korupsi besar-besaran dalam sejarah kami. Lebih dari 150 corrupt government officials telah diadili dan sebagian telah masuk penjara. Dan banyak lagi yang kita lakukan, kita memberikan power kepada lembaga-lembaga anti korupsi. Dan satu hal yang saya senang bahwa iklim takut korupsi sudah mulai berkurang. Tetapi saya mengatakan masih perlu waktu untuk membuat sistem kami menjadi lebih clean, menjadi lebih bagus. Itu agenda kami, itu prioritas kami, dan kami akan melakukan segalanya karena itu kepentingan Indonesia sendiri. Dengan good governance, effective bureaucracy, korupsi yang makin hilang, tentu ekonomi kami akan bagus dan keadilan akan tegak di Indonesia.
Thank you. Let's come out here for a question.
Mr. President, I'm Timothy Ong from Brunei Darussalam. Mr. President, you have a vision that sees Islam, democracy, and economic development as mutually reinforcing. How do you see this working? Do you see this vision as having broader relevance to the Muslim world? Thank you.
Ya, saya harus mengatakan bahwa Indonesia akan terus bekerja keras dan insya Allah suatu saat bisa menjadi model bahwa tidak ada kontradiksi, tidak ada konflik antara Islam, demokrasi, dan modernitas. Tetapi ini not to be taken for granted. Dengan globalisasi, dengan spread of radicalism di banyak tempat, Indonesia pun harus menjaga kultur, semangat, dan hakikat kehidupan kami yang sebenarnya moderat, Islam yang moderat. Ini pun harus kami jaga dengan sekuat tenaga. Saya berharap meskipun Indonesia tidak posisi untuk mendikte negara-negara lain, negara-negara Islam di manapun, saya pikir tidak perlu dikhawatirkan ada konflik antara Islam dengan demokrasi, antara Islam dengan modernitas. Dan kami akan lakukan itu semua. Mudah-mudahan karena Indonesia juga mengalami masa pasang surut, ups and down, jika kami suatu saat betul-betul menjadi contoh model bahwa sekali lagi demokrasi, Islam, dan modernitas hidup berdampingan secara damai, saya pikir negara lain pun juga bisa melakukan hal yang sama.
Let me ask you one other question about Indonesian democracy. You've talked about Indonesia being a bridge to the Muslim world, but there's another issue. There are those in other countries in Asia and elsewhere who have resisted democratic values because they say growth and prosperity have to come first. Is Indonesia an answer to that as well?
Iya, saya kurang percaya bahwa ada juga konflik antara pembangunan atau ekonomi atau prosperity dengan demokrasi. Indonesia pernah mengalami mengutamakan pembangunan ekonomi, mengutamakan stabilitas agar ekonomi tumbuh dan kemudian prosperity bisa diperkuat di mana-mana. Ternyata gagal. Ternyata ada sesuatu yang diinginkan oleh rakyat, not only economic benefit, tetapi sesuatu yang juga menjadi bagian dari kehidupannya, freedom, rights, termasuk human rights. Kami belajar dari itu semua, oleh karena itu perlu ada balance, proper balance, antara freedom dengan responsibility, antara demokrasi dengan rule of law, antara politik dengan ekonomi. Menurut saya semuanya harus disatukan. Tetapi satu hal, demokrasi tidak berarti bisa berbuat apa saja. Harus ada rule of law, harus menjaga stability, harus ada kepatuhan pada peranata yang ada di sebuah negara itu. My own belief, menurut saya, jika demokrasi betul-betul matang, maka tidak perlu ada kekhawatiran bahwa demokrasi menghambat pencapaian prosperity atau pembangunan ekonomi.
I have a question over here.
Selamat sore Pak, nama saya Priya, saya adalah wakil mahasiswa dari organisasi Global Voices di Australia. Ada satu pertanyaan tentang hubungan Indonesia, Australia, dan Amerika. It's anticipated that America is going to establish an enhanced military presence, particularly in Darwin. How does the Indonesian regime view this new development?
The locating of American naval vessels in Darwin, Australia, and how do you view that?
Ya, sebenarnya kami tidak akan menanggapi kerjasama bilateral antara Amerika Serikat dengan Australia, karena saya yakin baik Amerika maupun Australia tentu memiliki semangat, memiliki komitmen bahwa Asia Pasifik harus tetap dijaga menjadi kawasan yang stabil, kawasan yang damai, kawasan yang aman, dan bisa justru membangun dan meningkatkan kerjasama ekonomi di antara negara ke negara itu. Dengan keyakinan dan harapan itulah maka Indonesia tidak punya pikiran yang luar biasa tentang kerjasama itu. Tentu pada saatnya, karena Australia sahabat dekat kami akan mendapatkan penjelasan tentang gagasan ini, demikian juga dengan Amerika Serikat. Pada prinsipnya itulah sikap kami, karena saya yakin semua yang engage di Asia Pasifik memiliki semangat yang sama untuk menjaga stabilitas, perdamaian, dan ketertiban kawasan.
Probably have time for one last question. I think I saw one back there.
Hi, my name is George Chiao from Triple Group from California, Los Angeles. I'm originally from China. I have a question for the President about China. What do you think the role will China play in the Pacific century, in the Asian Pacific century? Thank you.
Kalau ditanyakan pandangan saya bagaimana Tiongkok akan memainkan peranannya di Asia Pasifik di abad Pasifik ini, saya kira semua tahu bahwa Tiongkok telah tumbuh menjadi kekuatan besar, utamanya ekonomi. Oleh karena itu harapan saya, peran Tiongkok di kawasan ini bersama-sama dengan negara yang lain termasuk Amerika Serikat harus betul-betul menjadikan Asia Pasifik satu pilar penting dalam pertumbuhan ekonomi global. Kita melihat masalah-masalah yang dihadapi di Eropa. Kita juga sadar tidak mungkin ekonomi dunia hanya disangga oleh ekonomi Amerika atau Amerika Utara. Justru Asia yang dalam krisis yang lalu kita bisa survive dan tetap menyumbang pertumbuhan yang positif, maka mestinya peran Tiongkok ke depan harus ikut memperkuat pilar ini. Kemudian yang lain-lain di bidang ekonomi, misalkan politik, keamanan, sama dengan yang saya sampaikan tadi, peran Tiongkok yang saya harapkan bersama-sama membangun dynamic equilibrium, bersama-sama menjaga stabilitas, keamanan dan ketertiban kawasan ini secara umum.
Well, Mr. President, we're basically out of time, but I want to end where we began, which is with your music. Tell us, where do you find the time for music and
Ya, saya kira para pemimpin dimanapun selalu punya hobi. Ada hobi naik kuda, ada hobi main golf, ada hobi memancing. Hobi saya menulis lagu dan tidak terlalu sering. Kadang-kadang kalau inspirasi datang, mood sedang ada, entah 3 bulan sekali, 4 bulan sekali, saya tulis musik itu. Ini sebagai alat komunikasi saya dengan rakyat. Kalau saya menggunakan bahasa politik, biasanya ada jarak. Tapi kalau saya menggunakan lagu, komunikasi saya lebih mudah diterima oleh siapapun, identitas manapun, aliran politik apapun. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua tentu bisa membebaskan saya dari ketegangan yang berlebihan sebagai seorang leader. That's all.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President.